Welcome to Minukuu tutorials. In this fourth session of my tutorial on strings, vectors, and data frames, we will be looking at how to set the stringsAsFactors argument in data.frame function. In other words, when we are trying to construct a data frame in R, or better still in the read.table or CSV or CSV2 function when we are trying to read or import data into R. So in case you've missed the previous sessions of my tutorial on strings, vectors, and data frames, please do not hesitate to check right below in the description of this video, and you will find the link to the previous parts. The first part had to do with, like I said, how to write strings and vectors as well as data frames, and the second part had to do with how to convert character strings to variables, or let's say variables in general. I mean character strings to factors or numeric variables, or how do we convert, let's say, qualitative variable in the form of a factor to a character and vice versa, or how do we convert a character variable or string to what? A numeric variable. So we also looked at this, and then we also looked at how to use this, how to set the quote argument in read.table and read.csv. In other words, how do we use the quote argument in the read.table or read.csv functions when we are reading data into R. Now, in this final step, like I said, we are going to look at how we can also set the stringsAsFactors argument, or how do we use the stringsAsFactors argument in the data frame, data.frame function, or the read.table or the read.csv or the read.csv2 function when we are writing data into R, or is it reading, data into R. Okay, so without speaking much, I will simply start with how to set the stringsAsFactors argument in a data frame. All right, so when we talk about a string, first of all, I would like to inform you that I've already tackled anything that has to do with strings. We've said that string is simply a character or a group of characters. When we are talking about a character, it's any letter between A and Z, for instance, is a character. So it's either a character like A, or a group of characters like boys, that is a word that is enclosed by either matched quotations, that are double quotations, or single quotations. Why is writing strings so important? Because in R we cannot, when we are to enter a numeric quantity like 2, R doesn't give us any problem, but when we are to write something like a character like B, R gives us an error. So we have to enclose what do we call it, B, which is a character, in the form of in quotations. So now B becomes a string. A character in quotations is a string. Better still, if we have a group of characters that's a word, for instance boys, we have to enclose it in quotations. Either single or double quotations is the same. Sorry, let me use single quotations this time around. So there are two major ways of writing strings, either using single quotations or double quotations, but we cannot just write boy and hit enter, it gives us an error. Okay, with that being said, we will now look at how to, first of all, we will look at how to use the stringsAsFactors argument in data frame, and we also look at the stringsAsFactor argument in read.table or read.csv. Any of them is the same thing. Okay, but first of all, when we talk of let me open the data set that we'll be using. Okay, so we have this data set here. Okay, this is our data set that we'll read into R using the read.csv or the read.table command, and we will set the stringsAsFactors argument. Okay, and then for the data frame, we can quickly construct the data frame. But before we do that, what is the purpose of stringsAsFactors? stringsAsFactors argument actually allows us to set our strings, as I explained here, to set our strings, that is all the characters within our variables, within our data set which are in the form of characters like boy, girl, anything that is in letters form as response within our variables or our data set are going to be set as strings. That is, when we are importing data, I usually consider all characters as strings, but let me just give you a quick example. If not, it wouldn't be clear. So let's first of all construct a data frame, and I'll explain. So let's construct a data frame. Let's say, for instance, we have names of students. Okay, so let's say names of students. To construct a data frame, you first of all need a couple of vectors. Then you regroup these vectors into a data frame. So names is equal to, let's say, we concatenate boys. So you see that as I'm writing boys, what am I doing? Let me say Agnes. So Agnes is the name of a person. Why have I kept it in quotations? Because it's a string, and in R, as I explained, we have to write characters in quotations. And when we put characters in quotations for R to be able to recognize them, then they now become strings and no longer just characters, mere characters. So we have, or we could call them character strings. So we have Agnes, for instance, Kojo, which is a Ghanaian name, and we could add Ali, for instance. So write Ali also in quotation. So all these are Ali, Kojo, Alice are all strings. Okay, so now we can also add another, for instance, Ali, Kojo, maybe Joshua. Okay, so all these, as I explained, these are what? This is a vector composed of strings, so you could call it a string vector. Now let's also write, for instance, another vector, and now we'll call it Max. So these are the names of students, and we also have Max. Okay, so the Max, we will concatenate, for instance, let's say we have the first student had, let's say, 30. It's an exam, the first student had 30, the second student had 70, the other student had, for instance, I don't know, let's give him 60, and then the last student had, let's say, 40, or let's give him 65, Okay, so these are some marks that I've just written. Okay, and then so this is a numeric vector. This is what? A string vector, or a character vector if you want. And let's move on. We can have another column where we will have, let's say, interpretation of the results. So with the interpretation, we will say when the student has 30, for instance, so we concatenate, and then when the student has 30, we'll call that one fail, but he scored less than. Then when he scores, let's say, 70 or above 50, means the student has passed. So failed, passed, and say failed. And this one we will say passed. We'll put comma, another passed. All the rest have passed. So passed, passed. Okay, so now let's execute these three vectors. So I just select everything, and okay, and now all these are executed. So we have the three vectors here, and now we add we now write our data frame. What do? We use the data frame command. So we can call this, let's say, data. Let's call this data, or let's call it class. It's a class of students. So let's say class is equal to, then we will use the data.frame. In case you can't see properly, I can zoom for you to see properly. Okay, so we now say class is equal to, then now we can use the, what do we call it, the data frame command in order to write our data frame. So I'll use data.frame, okay, into brackets, we have, for the interruption, we have to now enter our, what do we call it, enter the variables that we want to use to make our data frame. So we have names, first of all, which is the first vector, followed by marks, full put comma, and then interpretation. You have to write it the way you wrote it there. So interpretation, and then we put comma. We can hit enter to have some space. Okay, so here we have to now what should I say, indicate or what should I say, we have to now set the stringsAsFactors argument. So first of all, when we say stringsAsFactors, okay, let me before we proceed, I've made you understand that any letter or any group of letters, or if you want any group of characters in quotations, is what we term as a string in R. So which are the strings here? The strings vectors here include names and guess what? Interpretation. This is a numeric vector. So when we say stringsAsFactors is equal to, when we say the stringsAsFactors argument to be equal to true, then what that means is that all these strings in our data frame or data set will be considered as what? As factors. But by default, these are characters. So we could call them character strings. So when you say stringsAsFactors is equal to false, R will recognize all strings in your data set as what? Characters, as just mere characters. In other words, all characters are strings. All characters are factors. What should I say? All characters could be either simple characters or what? Factors, depending on the nature of the question that was asked to collect the data. For instance, interpretation, failed or passed. This is something that is categorical. For instance, if you go to a different school, you can use the same questionnaire, and you can ask the people, after the exam, you can judge them based on passed or failed. So you see that we have levels. So we have how many levels here? We have 2 levels, either passed or failed. So this is categorical. We could have had 3 levels, maybe passed, failed, or maybe, I don't know, in between, I don't know. So just like sex, we have male or female, or let's say marital status, divorced, married or not married. You see, so this is categorical. When you go to any population, it's the same thing. But a qualitative variable that is like names, as it is here, it's not a categorical variable, because this is just a mere character. These are mere characters, because when you go to a different class, the names will vary. It's not something that is categorical. Okay, with that being said, we can now set our stringsAsFactors argument. So I can say stringsAsFactors argument to be equal to true. So we have the choice. For instance, if in your data frame you have a lot of characters, if you have a lot of characters, you can decide to set your stringsAsFactors argument to be equal to what? False. So that all your variables or your columns in your data frame will be what? Because majority of them are characters. So you just set all of them as characters. And after which, the few that are factors, I would show you how to convert them from characters back to now factors. In the same way, if you know that maybe your data set is filled with a lot of factors, then why not say a stringsAsFactors argument is equal to true, so that after which you can now come and select the few the few characters that were considered as factors, and now convert them back to characters. For the meantime, let's say stringsAsFactors is equal to true. So if I should execute this, what happens? By default, stringsAsFactors is always equal to false. But now that I've executed this, so I have so if I want the data set to appear, I simply type in the console, let's say print data, or print what's the name? The name is class, so print class. Okay, and we have our data frame here. You see? So now we have our data frame here. And if you want to know the nature of these strings here, so see that this is a string, because this is a string, these are numbers, they are not strings, but these are also strings. So if you want to know the nature of your data, the variables or the columns, you can use the str command. Into brackets, you write class, which is the name of our data frame. When I hit enter, you see that R is telling us that names, as I told you, because we set strings as factors, we set strings as factors to be true. You see that all the categorical variables like names and interpretation are recognized as what? Factors. But in real life, names are not factors, they are just mere characters. But for interpretation, failed or passed, this one is categorical. So there are two levels. So you know, but this one is, it gave four levels, but in actual the names are not characters. So if you want to convert names back to factor or back to character, what do? We simply use the as.character command. So we simply write the name of the data frame, which is class. Then we use the $sign to select names, and then we will say is equal to as.character. So we use as.character, then we repeat class $names. And if I should hit enter, right now our names will be converted to character. So if I should use str into brackets class once again and hit enter, you see that now our names are now converted into characters. As a matter of fact, there's nothing really important about characters or whatever you could have. There's nothing really important about strings being recognized as characters or factors. It's the same thing. If you, for instance, if I want the table of let's say names, I will just say table into brackets names, into brackets, let's say tables, into brackets interpretation. If I want interpretation, then I have to use so I will have to use class $. I want to select interpretation, so okay, it's telling me that how many students we have. We have 4 students, 1 failed and 3 passed. In the same way, even if we had, for instance, should we convert interpretation? Let's assume we want to convert. Okay, let's use names too. So if we use names and we also convert names to let's not convert names, but if we want the table of names, for instance, so we just say names table into brackets class $names. Okay, you see that it's still, even though names is a character, but here there are no levels, but you know, it has still given us a table. Even here we have 2 levels, but when we wanted a count, you know, want the table of a factor, it gave us a table. When we wanted the table of characters, it still gave us a table. So what that means is that even if we had set, let's say, interpretation to be, let's say, to be a character, that wouldn't make any change. I hope my explanation is clear. So it's not really what is important is that you should make sure that, for instance, names are not numeric data or numeric vector or numeric variables are not recognized as character or factors, because this could be bad, you see. But sometimes you may also want to convert numeric data into characters. Why? Because in some cases, so character takes 2 forms. Character can either take numeric data like numbers, and it can also take strings, that's characters in quotes, you know. So character takes either strings or what do we call it, or numeric data. Why am I saying this? For instance, we can have an ordinal variable like scores. For instance, scores of athletes in a game. These are ordinal, so with ordinal variables, we term them as qualitative ordinal variables. They are not nominal variables, but they are qualitative ordinal variables. So these can also be considered as characters. It depends on the kind of analysis that you want to do with your data. So let's assume we want to convert marks into character. How do we do that? To convert marks into character, we simply use the as dot. Let me go right straight in the console. If we want to convert marks into character, we simply use or factor. We can do that. We can either convert into factor or whatever. So if we want to convert it into character, I think we can use the as dot. So we say class dollar to select what do we call the marks. Marks originally is a numeric variable. Now we want to convert it into character. So we can simply use this one to be equal to as dot. If we want to convert it into character, then we have to say as dot character. You see? And if you want to convert it into factor, then we have to say as dot factor. You see, so right now let's convert it into character, for instance. I'm sorry for that. So let's say I'll just hit enter and it has spoiled everything. So let's say class dollar max, which is numeric. Now we want to convert into factor. So dollar max is equal to as dot numeric, as dot. We can use either as dot factor or as dot character. So let's use as dot factor, for instance. As dot factor into brackets class dollar max. Okay, now if I hit enter and I now come and str into brackets class to see the structure of our data, you realize that max is now converted into character. So let's assume sometimes when we import data, you have to use the str command to verify that your data is well imported. Even if you have something like this, you might not know that your data, your marks have been, sometimes we read the data into R and R recognizes quantitative data as qualitative data. So it might recognize that marks is a factor, meanwhile marks is actually quantitative or numeric. So let's assume we want to calculate the mean of marks. So we say class dollar max. If I should hit enter, what happens? It gives us an error because we have converted marks into what? Character, into factor, you see, or character. So now if you want to convert marks back into numeric, it's very simple. We have to say class, once again, dollar factor, or dollar max, sorry, to be equal to as dot numeric into brackets what? Class dollar max. After this is done, now if we say str into brackets class, you see that now max is now numeric. If we want the mean of that, we can simply say mean into brackets max, sorry, class dollar max, and it has given us a mean. Okay, so I think we are done with data frame. All that has to do with setting the stringsAsFactors command for data frame. We are done with that. Now, how do we also set the stringsAsFactors argument when we are using the read.table or the read.csv command? It's very simple. It's the same format. Let's assume we have this data set here and we want to import it. So I'll simply save it on the desktop. So I say let me save it on the desktop in the form of a CSV file. Okay, so we save it on the desktop in the form of a CSV file. Okay, now to import this data into R using the read.csv command, what do we have to do? We simply come to R, and then I will say, for instance, data. So we use data. Sorry, we say, for instance, data is equal to read.csv. If your data is, we have csv2, which is data that is delimited by semicolon, and then CSV classic, which is, or classical CSV, which is for data that is delimited by comma. If your Excel version is English, then definitely when you save your CSV file, it will be in the form of classical CSV, a comma delimited file. But if your Excel version is, for instance, is in French, when you save it, you will have a semicolon delimited file, and you rather pick the CSV2. So here, what do we have to do? We simply go into the desktop, write quotations, then we go to the desktop, and then collect and then copy the file path. So on the desktop right here, we have our CSV file here, which we've obtained. Then we right click on it, click on properties, click on security, then we copy the full file extension here. Okay, now if we should come back to our R and just come and paste it here in between the, you simply Control V to paste, and after which R doesn't work with forward backslash, so we have to put forward slash to read our data into R. Okay, so now after this we can hit enter in order to have some space, and then I'll set the stringsAsFactors argument. So I'll say stringsAsFactors argument is equal to, let's say, false. If I say false, what that means is that all the strings within my data frame that I'm importing will be considered as what? Factors, as characters. Let's look at the data set. When we look at this particular data set, what can we say about it? How many factors do we have here? For instance, we have a name here is a character, is a string. We also have another string here, which is valid. So here, we have, yes, so in case, assuming we're having a lot of names and other things, or let's say we're having a lot of factors, then we would have said stringsAsFactors is equal to true, and after which you can just convert a few variables that we want to convert to characters. But for the meantime, let's just maintain it like this. So let's go back to our data set and execute the command. We simply select all of this, look at it very well, use the read.csv command, and we are about to import our data. So we've set the stringsAsFactors to be false. So if I should run this, our data set has been imported. So now if I should print the data set, let's see what happens. So print data, and this is our data set being imported here, as you can see. Now if I should use the str command to know the nature of our variable, so I say str into brackets data, and you realize that the two strings will be considered as characters. So you see that names is considered as character, no here is character, and then we also have what, validation, that is no, this is also character, but you see that the rest are numeric. And like I told you, see that the characters are written in what, are quoted, so they are strings. A character that is quoted now becomes a string. So these are the strings, all the strings. Since we set the stringsAsFactors argument to be false, R has considered all the strings to be what, characters. So this is the first string, which is valid, is character. The names is also what, no, is also character, but the rest are numeric. In the same way, if we want to now convert, let's say, valid into factor or valid into numeric, or let's assume we want to convert let's say valid to numeric, all you have to simply say data here. Sorry for the interruption. If we want to convert, let's say valid, which is normally R has recognized it as a character, we want to convert it into numeric or maybe factor, then we have to just say valid is data, and we select the variable which is valid. Okay, valid to be equal to what? As dot factor into brackets, we repeat the same thing, data dollar what? Valid, and we just hit enter. Now if I should say str into brackets data, you realize that now valid has become a factor. So to do the conversion is very simple. If you want to convert to numeric, then you select the variable and you say as.numeric. If you want to convert it into factor, you select the variable, you say as.factor. If you want to convert into character, you say as.character. I hope my explanation was clear. For instance, if we want to convert, I think the explanation is clear. Thank you so much for watching, and please subscribe. This is how we use the or we set the stringsAsFactors argument in either a data frame or the data.frame argument function, or the read.csv or the read.table function when we are importing data into R. Remember that it's the same thing applied to, in this example, I just use read.csv, but if you are using read.table, all you have to do, you put all the necessary parameters, and after which you put comma, and just write stringsAsFactors is either equal to true or false. When you say it's equal to true, it's based on some logic. If you have a lot of factors within your data set, then you, by default, why not just set all strings to be what? Factors. So you say it's equal to true, then after which you can convert a few characters or the few factors that you think they are not correct, they are not truly factors, but rather characters. You reconvert them to characters. But if you feel like, oh, your data contains a lot of characters, then you set stringsAsFactors to be equal to false, so that all your data will be recognized, all the strings will be recognized as characters, and if there are a few factors among them, you convert them into what? Factors. Thank you so much for watching once again, and please remember to subscribe. See you in the next video. In the next video, we shall be looking at how we can convert a how we can convert a vector into a string. So please subscribe, and you shall find this particular video right below in the description of this video. Please subscribe, and bye.